Hello, welcome to our RecapPlus channel with me, Matthew. Today we will watch a recap movie called The Departed, released in 2006. This is a spoiler content video, so please turn on the subtitle and let's start the story. Some years ago in South Boston, crime was rampant, and the Irish-American mob boss, Frank Costello, reflected on how he preferred to shape his surroundings and believed that seizing what you desired in life was essential. He visited the Park Cafe to collect money from the owner and encountered Colin Sullivan, a teenage American of Irish descent who had lost his parents and was living with his grandmother. Frank purchased groceries and a comic book for Colin, even providing some money. During their conversation, Frank inquired about Colin's school performance, and upon hearing that Colin was doing well, Frank suggested that Colin could earn some extra money by contacting him in the future. It didn't take long for Colin to begin working on cars for Frank, all while imbibing in his life philosophy and becoming a kind of protege. Frank warned Colin that those who crossed him or attempted to control him would meet their demise. Fast forward to the present day, and Colin, now an adult, is in training at the Massachusetts State Police Academy. Following his graduation ceremony, he spotted Frank's car parked on the street and approached it. In the car, Frank presented Colin with a graduation gift, stating that he had earned it. Colin was now officially acting as Frank's informant within the police force. While Colin was actively involved in police operations, Billy Costigan, an American with Irish roots, was still in training at the State Police Academy. Tragically, Billy's mother passed away, leaving him without immediate family. Colin successfully passed the detective exam and was welcomed into the Special Investigation Unit, SIU, by Captain Queenan and Staff Sergeant Dignam. After Colin left Queenan's office, Billy had his turn. Billy underwent intense questioning regarding his family connections in South Boston, particularly his uncle Jackie, who had a history as a small-time mobster and bookie before his murder. Despite doubts about Billy's suitability for the force, they tempted him with a substantial tax-free bonus to go undercover and infiltrate the mob, aiming to capture Frank Costello. Captain Queenan outlined the terms of the operation, which included a guilty plea for assault, jail time, probation, and mandated psychiatric evaluations, all to solidify his undercover identity, and Billy agreed. After serving 4 months in prison, Billy paid a visit to his Aunt Kathy's house. There, he revealed to his cousin Sean that he had received insurance money following his mother's death and intended to invest it in buying and selling drugs for profit. He assured Sean that he was not a police officer. The two ventured out at night, engaging in drug deals and even visiting a bar where Sean struck up a conversation with Mr. French, Costello's right-hand man, and a few other individuals. An altercation ensued at the bar when a patron insulted Billy for ordering cranberry juice, but this was a deliberate move by Billy to attract Mr. French's attention. Billy's plan worked as Mr. French intervened, offering stern advice and even buying Billy a cranberry juice. In the meantime, Sergeant Dignam addressed the SIU team at police headquarters. He served as the unit's liaison to the undercover section, emphasizing that the true identities of undercover operatives would remain undisclosed due to concerns about departmental leaks. Dignam then briefed the team on the latest developments in the Costello case. Frank was planning to sell stolen military-grade microprocessors to China. Colin and Trooper Berrigan faced difficulties in their efforts to gather leads, as the South Boston community was fearful of crossing Costello. Simultaneously, Colin was feeding inside information to Frank, aiding him in avoiding law enforcement. Colin's encounter with Madeline, the police psychiatrist, in an elevator marked a significant development. Colin identified himself as a state trooper and a law student. Their interaction resulted in Madeline providing her business card to Colin. Following this, Colin and Madeline enjoyed dinner at a French restaurant. Billy's path led him to a bar in South Boston where Frank Costello happened to walk in and engage with him. Billy, pretending not to recognize Frank, followed him to a back room, where Frank informed him of potential threats from the Italian individuals he had earlier confronted. Frank offered to protect Billy from these threats and engaged him in a conversation about his late father while Mr. French conducted a search. After verifying that Billy was not carrying any incriminating items, Mr. French brutally broke Billy's cast off, causing intense pain. Frank continued to interrogate Billy about his true identity while inflicting physical harm. In severe pain, Billy consistently denied being a police officer. Ultimately, Frank coerced Billy into agreeing to stop his drug-related activities and rewarded him with a stack of cash to address his injured hand. Meanwhile, Colin and the police force were conducting an investigation into the deaths of 2 Italian Americans from Providence, the very individuals who were poised to take action against Billy. During this time, Colin used his dual role to provide Frank with inside information regarding the investigation. In a separate narrative thread, Billy, already tormented by the physical and psychological demands of his undercover work, sought relief in his therapy session with Dr. Madeline Madden. Billy's request for medication to alleviate his stress was initially denied, but Madeline eventually agreed and prescribed the medication. Despite this, Madeline suggested that Billy seek another therapist and confirmed that she was already in a serious relationship. Billy was visibly disturbed by this revelation. One day, Billy was confronted by a robber at his home, who had failed to pay Frank his share of the money. Under the threat of harm, the robber revealed that Frank was an informant for the FBI, explaining why Frank's operations remained unscathed by the law. Shocked by this revelation, Billy reported it to Queenan. Members of Costello's gang, including Billy, were summoned to a warehouse to complete personal information forms. They were instructed to place their forms in an envelope labeled Citizens Trust. Billy completed his form, labeled the envelope, and left the location. He subsequently visited Madeline's apartment, where they engaged in a conversation, kissed, and eventually made love. During this time, Frank and Colin arranged a clandestine meeting in a movie theater, where Colin received an envelope from Frank before departing. Unknown to Colin, Billy had been observing the exchange from a concealed location in the theater. Billy decided to tail Colin through downtown alleys, leading to a tense confrontation. Colin grew suspicious and eventually stabbed a restaurant employee who was taking out the trash. This act enabled Colin to evade Billy in the ensuing chaos. Back at the police headquarters, Colin and Dignam had a tense encounter, with accusations and heated exchanges regarding Colin's loyalty and the need for information about undercover agents. Later at home, Colin confides in Madeline about his aspirations. He tells her that if he wasn't a state trooper, he could finish his law degree in just a year. Madeline listens and acknowledges that moving to another city might not be a bad idea, implying a fresh start. Alone in his office, Colin finally opens the envelope given to him by Frank. He meticulously examines the names on the computer but is unable to find any significant information. Realizing that the key to identifying the mole lies in tracking Captain Queenan, he puts the captain under surveillance. At a bar, Costello assembles a team of new recruits and tells Billy that he can have the night off because he's assigning the new crew for the evening. Billy leaves the bar and immediately phones Queenan, reporting that Frank is using new guys for a drug operation but suspects that it could be disinformation. A little later, Frank contacts Colin and inquires about any information regarding drugs or new recruits. Colin reassures Frank that there's nothing to worry about, stating that he would have been informed if anyone in the department had knowledge of such matters. Frank hangs up and tells Mr. French that Billy is not the informant. Colin is on the phone with one of the detectives tailing Captain Queenan, and he follows Queenan into an abandoned building. On the rooftop, Billy informs Queenan that Frank is involved in a drug deal, but he's not sure of the exact location. He shares that Frank appears to be losing his grip on reality and is covered in blood. Billy expresses his desperation, fearing that Frank will kill him when he discovers his true identity. Queenan offers apologies for the trouble and promises to get Billy out of this situation. Meanwhile, Colin calls Frank and tells him that he's identified the mole, and Queenan is currently meeting with him. Colin provides Frank with the location, prompting Frank to send his crew to deal with the mole. Delahant, a member of Frank's crew, calls Billy and discloses that they've found the rat and provides him with the address. He mentions that he was followed by Costello's people. They rush to the rooftop door. As Costello's men exit the building, the surveillance unit arrives in a car outside, just as Costello's crew exits a van armed with loaded guns. The detectives mistakenly assume that Queenan must be meeting with Costello's crew and inform Colin over the radio. Colin instructs them to focus on Queenan. Meanwhile, Billy and Queenan head down the staircase, but it's too late. Costello's men are already ascending the stairs. Queenan urges Billy to take the fire escape while he remains behind. Outside, Billy rushes down an alley, and Queenan lands on the road right in front of him. Costello's crew exits the building as Billy crouches next to Queenan's lifeless body. Fitzy berates Billy for being late and orders him into the van. One of the detectives gets out of the car and shoots Delahant in the stomach, leading to a shootout between the detectives and Costello's men. Fitzy returns fire, injuring one of the detectives in the shoulder. Costello's men quickly get into the van and drive away. Back at the police station, Captain Ellerby questions Colin about why Queenan entered the abandoned building. Dignam asks Colin why he had Queenan followed in the first place, to which Colin claims it's internal investigations business. Tensions escalate, and Dignam starts physically assaulting Colin until other officers intervene. Colin informs Captain Ellerby that he suspects Queenan was killed by his own undercover operative. Dignam vehemently disputes this claim but ultimately resigns from his position. Meanwhile, Frank's crew regroups at an empty bar. Tensions run high as Fitzy confronts Billy about his whereabouts. Delahunt calls Billy over and informs him that he provided him with the wrong address when he called him, but Billy still showed up at the correct location. As Delahunt grabs Billy's arm and asks why he didn't reveal the truth to anyone, Billy reaches for his gun. Just before Delahunt dies, he asks, "Tell me why I didn't tell nobody?" Billy realizes that Delahunt was also an undercover cop, pronouncing him dead as he exits the bar. Billy waits for Madeline outside her office building. She approaches him, sensing his distress, but ultimately, she tells him she can't be a friend to him and walks away, leaving Billy disappointed. Colin is alone in his office, contemplating recent events. He takes Queenan's phone off an evidence table and dials the last number called. Uncertain whether or not to answer his undercover phone when it rings, Billy answers, but neither of them says a word. Colin identifies himself as Sergeant Sullivan and states that he's taking over Queenan's unit, revealing that Dignam is on leave. Billy hangs up, causing Colin to call him back. They discuss their next steps. While Colin is momentarily away, Billy notices an envelope labeled Citizens Trust beneath a pile of papers on Colin's desk. Realizing that Colin is the mole and knows his true identity, Billy decides to leave. Colin returns to his office, discovering that Billy is gone and understanding that his secret is exposed. He proceeds to delete Billy's file from the police database. Billy goes to Madeline's office and hands her an envelope, instructing her to keep it safe and open it if something happens to him or if he calls and tells her to do so. He implies that she should think about it and tell him in 2 weeks if she still wants to. Later, Colin is sleeping when Madeline places a white envelope on his chest, containing a sonogram that reveals she is pregnant with a boy. Colin kisses her. In the living room, Madeline finds an envelope addressed to Colin from Billy. She listens to a CD recording that reveals Colin's betrayal as Frank's mole. She plays the recording for Colin when he awakens. He calls Billy to discuss their predicament. As Colin ascends to the rooftop, Billy suddenly appears, brandishing a firearm, and orders Colin to raise his hands. In swift succession, he handcuffs Colin, disarms him, and declares his intention to place him under arrest. Despite Colin's attempts to persuade Billy to reconsider, his explanations fall on deaf ears. Billy remains unwavering and unconvinced by Colin's justifications. Defiantly, Colin contends that nobody will believe Billy's allegations since he has eradicated his police file and erased his identity. Just as Billy is about to assist Colin to his feet, Trooper Brown dramatically enters the rooftop through the door, brandishing a firearm. Billy had reached out to Trooper Brown, aware of their shared history from their police training days, as one of the few people who knows him well. In this tense standoff, Billy claims that he was the one who contacted Trooper Brown, while Colin urges Brown to shoot Billy. Brown, recognizing Colin's authority as a sergeant, instructs Billy to relinquish his weapon. In a final desperate plea, Billy passionately asserts that Colin is Costello's informant and presents his evidence. He proceeds to escort Colin downstairs via an elevator. When the elevator doors open, Billy tragically succumbs to a gunshot wound between the eyes. At this fateful moment, Berrigan, another of Frank's undercover agents, emerges to unshackle Colin. Simultaneously, Trooper Brown disembarks from the elevator and discovers Billy's lifeless body on the floor. Berrigan, executing a sinister agenda, eliminates Trooper Brown with a gunshot. He confides in Colin that Frank is on the verge of exposing them to the FBI, compelling Colin to finish the job. Berrigan then hands Colin the firearm, and, without hesitation, Colin terminates Berrigan with a gunshot to the head. Back at police headquarters, Colin crafts a narrative to the department, alleging that Trooper Berrigan had murdered Billy, along with Trooper Brown. He asserts that he was compelled to neutralize Berrigan in self-defense, alleging Berrigan's affiliation as Costello's mole. As part of the narrative, Colin strongly advocates for Billy to be posthumously awarded the Medal of Merit. In a poignant scene, Billy is honored with a ceremonial police funeral, attended by both Madeline and Colin, though they stand on opposite sides of the casket. Madeline is visibly distraught, shedding tears. Following the funeral, Colin attempts to engage Madeline in conversation, inquiring about the baby. However, Madeline silently walks past him, entirely disinterested. Then, on one fateful day, Colin returns to his apartment, only to be startled by the unanticipated presence of Dignam inside. Observing Dignam's distinctive plastic hospital boots, Colin recognizes the dire circumstances. Dignam aims his firearm at Colin, leading to a single fatal shot to Colin's head.